6th of December 2022. In this Skidmark, another Warrafak moment, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I see about NATO and some of the EU leaders, and I've got a lot of questions, and mostly I've got the questions to the citizens of the EU, the citizens of the UK, the citizens of the US. I listened to a debate where Scott Ritter was talking, and the one guy said the Americans are doing something, and then he automatically he corrected himself and he said, look, I don't mean the Americans as citizens, I mean the American government. And Scott Ritter said to him, listen, you are correct to say Americans, because it is us, the Americans, citizens, that are allowing our government to do all these things. I was actually amazed when he said that, because I've always also tried not to direct my dismay at the population and keep the focus on the government. But what Scott said was actually correct. It is the citizens, the Americans, the British, the French, the German, they are allowing their governments to do these things that they are doing. Now, I have done a Skidmark way back, I think in April, about the fact that NATO will be out of ammunition in 7 days if they should get involved in a war with Russia. And a lot of people gave me a lot of flack about that. And what do you know? In the past few days, numbers has been released by the military-industrial complex. Some of them say it's going to take them 3 years to build the stocks back for the American military. Some of them says they don't know how long it will take them. Others of them says that their production capacity, 5 years of production, has been consumed by the Ukraine in 7 months. Let that sink in, Americans. Let that sink in, British. Let that sink in, Europeans. You have to take note of that, because your governments are spoiling for a fight, direct fight with Russia. They're looking for shit with the Chinese. They're stirring crap in the Middle East. And in the meantime, this West, this wonderful West, has basically been disarmed by the Ukraine war. Now, listen, look at this image. It appeared on Telegram. This woman is a war criminal. And you have to agree, if you take into consideration what she did in the past 7-8 months in fueling that fire in the Ukraine, it is correct to say she's a war criminal. Her actions, she personally was on a vendetta to start all the sanctions against Russia. Now they're sitting at working on package number 9. What the fuck is that? Europeans are suffering. The European economy is fucked because of the sanctions against Russia. But yet they go on and go on. And now here in the late afternoon, she all of a sudden realized that the Americans is benefiting tremendously out of the war. They're benefiting out of selling the energy to Europe. They're benefiting by European industries moving to America. Now she is singing a different song, and she wants to take action to protect the European economy. Fuck that. This woman is a war criminal. Then listen to this Schultz. Olaf Scholz has suggested that Europe should go back to its pre-war peace order with Russia and resolve all questions of common security after the war in Ukraine, if President Putin is willing to renounce aggression against his neighbors. What the fuck is that? Putin tried for 8 years to avoid a war in the Ukraine. But these guys pissed on every piece of paper Moscow sent to them. Now they are struggling. Germany is in deep shit. The German economy is wrecked. Now they're talking crap like this. And you get that Ursula van der crazy. The EU is erecting a Russian war crimes tribunal. Russia must pay. And what do I have to say about that? Fuck you, van der Leyen. You will be tried for war crimes. And then we have this in France. People protesting in Paris demanding the country's withdrawal from NATO. They also demand that France accept neutrality. The European people is beginning to wake up. This leadership of Europe is going to be in deep shit. That is all I know. And then you get something like this. Now they understand it. Why did you do it? Did you want to defeat the nuclear Russia? Former French presidential candidate Nicolas Dupont. Zelensky's goal is no longer to defend Ukraine, but to become an instrument of Russia's destruction by sacrificing his people. And this is a very big mistake. Ukraine bombed Donbass for 8 years. Donbass is a Russian territory that is located on the border of Slavic world of Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine was Russia until 1991. And all this for Ukraine with a population of 35 million, which is half Russian and half Ukrainian. We absolutely must end the economic sanctions. It's absolutely essential to stop the supply of weapons. We need to sit down at the negotiating table. We are the ones who pay the price and who have been destroying Europe for a long time. Ukraine must be defended, but we must not commit suicide with Europe and Ukraine. And I'll tell you that I'm not the only one who says this. But, as usual, sense and sanity is ignored. Because the fucking warmongers in the shithouse in Washington is determined to keep having wars available where they can make money, where they can pump American taxpayers' money into, instead of investing in their own country. Their own country is falling apart. The infrastructure is fucked. I mean, their railway systems is dilapidated, their highway systems is dilapidated. And then you look at China. They build 5,700 kilometers of high-speed rail every year. America hasn't got 1 kilometer. Then another gem, pearl of wisdom from Schultz. I am convinced that Russia can no longer win a war on the battlefield. His predecessor said the same in April 1943. Great example to follow. And then from that Stoltenberg, Putin is now trying to use winter as a weapon. What the fuck is he talking about? Doesn't he read the history books? I cannot understand these people. They are fucking past stupid. Now look here what NATO do. Never forget, in case you did not know, in Aleppo, Syria, Al-Kindal Hospital was the largest cancer treatment hospital in the Middle East, and it is a living witness to the war crimes against Syria. Look at what the fucking West did. Look there. Look at the top, that hospital. This is in a third world country. It took a hell of a lot of money to build that thing. The population suffer to get that built. And then in comes the West and look there, fuck it all up. And they are proud of themselves. I have always said, this West need to understand something. They don't understand the level of hatred towards them in the rest of the world. The fuck up is, the rest of the world is 80% of the world's population. What the fuck is going to be left of this West if that 80% decides this is now the end, we've had enough, and they go on a crusade? Don't bluff yourself and think the military of the US and of the UK and of NATO will be able to stop them. They'll have to deal with people and countries like China, Russia, Northern Korea, Iran, all India, countries with formidable military capacity. And then we get to this Macron. Macron says new security architecture should give guarantees for Russia. Yes, Einstein, where did you find that gem? The West should consider how to address Russia's need for security guarantees if President Putin agrees to negotiations about ending the war in Ukraine. Can you believe it? This man, I don't know if they're all high on drugs or what. Emmanuel Macron. This means that one of the essential points we must address, as President Putin has always said, is the fear that NATO comes right up to its doors and the deployment of weapons that could threaten Russia. Well, fuck Einstein, you were part of that group that were pushing all these fucking weapons to the borders of Russia. Now you're surprised. Macron, that topic will be part of the topics for peace, so we need to prepare that we are ready to do how we protect our allies and member states and how to give guarantees to Russia the day it returns to the negotiating table. I would say this is about 8 years late. Now listen to what this fucking NATO shit do. This man says, "Why are we burying our children?" asks the father of the 10-year-old Veronica Badina. "What has this angelic child done to you?" her grandmother asks. The girl was treated for a long time for anemia. She recovered. On July 5th, 2022, a NATO shell tore her apart before her mother's and grandfather's eyes. More than 200 children have died in Donbass since the war began. As many people as possible must learn about the murdered Donbass children on the website Alley of the Angels. And for this cuck, the West will pay. Macron talks security guarantees for Russia. French President Macron said on Saturday that NATO should weigh on eventual guarantees for Russia's security in the settlement of the conflict in Ukraine. Macron is the second leader of the EU country this week to openly discuss Europe's future relationship with Russia. In an interview with France TF1 LC Networks, Macron described his meeting with US President Biden this week as a success, adding that the two leaders had begun to discuss what the peace following the ongoing conflict would look like. Macron acknowledged Russia's President Putin's concern that NATO will deploy weapons that will threaten Russia, and said the members of the US-led alliance need to prepare to offer guarantees on the security of the Russian Federation when Moscow joins Kiev and the West at the negotiating table. This guy must fucking stand in front of the mirror and look at what he is talking. He's talking and talking. The reality is, Russia is going to dictate the requirements for peace. They will dictate it. They're not going to sit and wait for the West to offer. And then you listen to this chick. Moldova will seek to join NATO. Pro-Western Sandu appears to have forgotten her own country's constitution, which contains provision on neutrality and ban on deployment of armed forces of other countries on Moldovan soil. But Sandu doesn't seem to care for her own country's principles. nor for 54% of Moldovans who are against joining NATO alliance. And where the fuck is that going to end? That Moldovan people better get rid of this chick. She's doing to them the same that chick did to the Finnish people. And then let's look at this cock. Before the Ukraine crisis and after the Ukraine crisis. Welcome to Ukraine, the most corrupt nation in Europe. The fight for Ukraine is a fight for liberal ideals. Reuters. Ukraine's new Nazi problem. Then, for foreign fighters, Ukraine offers purpose, camaraderie and a cause. Vox. Ukrainian comedian turned president is embroiled in Trump's impeachment mess. CNN. Ukrainians are giving 2 lessons in democracy that Americans have forgotten. New Europe. Ukrainian president's rule becomes increasingly corrupt, authoritarian. The Washington Post. Zelensky, the TV president who turned war hero. That is the hypocrisy of the fucking West and the media. Look at it and vomit. And then we get to this Blinken. This man, he ignites emotions in me that I will not verbalize. US Secretary of State Blinken says US Congress working on an alternative to recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Says the guy whose country has been at war non-stop and killed millions of civilians in countless wars to keep the petrodollar from collapsing. This man is also fucking dangerous. Dangerous to Americans. He will get Americans in deep shit. But the Americans allow them to do it. The Americans allow these people to draw them into wars. The Americans send their husbands and sons and daughters to go and die in other countries for causes that has got fuck all to do with America. Americans better wake up. Europeans better wake up. British better wake up. Ach, in any case, for the British, I don't have any hope for them. They fucked beyond repair. And now I'm going to stop with this. The reality is NATO needs to be disbanded. That organization is the single factor for European insecurity. That organization must be disbanded. But in any case, who am I? I'm a guy sitting at the southern tip of Africa. But I look and I see these things. And I can tell you, on a parting note, the West is fucked. Please give me a like and a subscribe and a share. Thank you for your support.